Okay, Genesis 23 is one of those places in scripture that when you first read it, you're like, why is this important? Why is this in here? It starts with the death of Sarah, and basically the rest of the chapter is talking about Abraham negotiating a place to be able to bury Sarah. Now, if you think about it in context, it was really important in this culture that you were buried with your descendants. You were buried in your homeland. And so as Sarah dies, she dies in Canaan. Now, if you go back to chapter 12 in Genesis, God has promised Canaan to Abraham's descendants, but it currently was not their homeland. He's this sojourner, he's kind of this nomad who's traveling around. And so you see that Abraham is like negotiating to buy this land, and he says, hey, I am here in verse 4, here I am, a stranger and a foreigner among you. Please sell me a piece of land so that I can give my wife a proper burial. And several other places throughout the chapter, he's like, hey, I want a permanent burial place for my family. And the chapter ends with a permanent burial place. Now, here's what's so cool about this. It is said multiple times in this chapter that this happens in the land in Canaan. Canaan is a much larger scope because this actually happens in a smaller area called Hebron, which is near Mamre, which we've already seen show up several times in the story. But the author is insistent on letting you know, hey, this burial plot that Abraham is buying for Sarah is in the land of Canaan. This is like a foreshadowing, a down payment on the promised land that God has already told Abraham he's going to give to his descendants. The patriarch of the family is making an investment and a decision to say, hey, this is going to be the place, the permanent burial place for descendants. This is the new homeland. It's just this really, really cool picture of God's faithfulness and Abraham believing in what the Lord has said and then taking steps of faith in action towards the promise that God has already spoken even before it comes to pass. It's just this really beautiful picture and reminder of God's goodness and faithfulness. This is the stuff I love about scripture, because when you look at it at first glance, you're like, I'm not even sure why this is important. But when you slow down, you realize, man, this is once again showing us that God is faithful.